Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the third installment of the Author Marketing Strategy Series. First and foremost, I want to say welcome to our special guest, the legendary Emily Vanderbilt. You know her, you love her, but in the event that you don't know her, Emily, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Vanderbilt, as Kyra said. I am an author coach with New Degree Press, and I am the author of a young adult historical fantasy series called the Crimson Time series. Author coach with New Degree Press, and I am the author.
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Emily. Again, I apologize for the slight delay on mine. That was weird. But we're so excited to have you. And if there's one thing that I've learned a lot about from you, and I gleaned so much inspiration from you, it's social media. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow us to show a slideshow presentation. Wahaha. So, Author Marketing Strategy Series, your digital presence. See, as I mentioned, here's a special guest, Emily Vanderbilt. So, why do social media? Top line, if you don't post, people won't find you. Emily, do you have any further thoughts on this? It seems pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, social media is really one of those things that you get out of it what you put into it. So if you don't have a presence, if you're not active, people aren't going to find you and they're not going to find your book.
Amen to that. I mean, I could honestly attest to me being more consistent on social media has definitely played a major role in me having access to more readership and
for sure
engaging with people that I wasn't expecting and kind of really evaluating what my audience is. That's been a critical aspect of it for me. Plus, the more content you have associated with your book, to your point, the easier it is for people to associate you, not in just being discoverable from an SEO standpoint, but also in associating more things with your brand. Kind of like as an example, super briefly, one time Emily had the example of color palettes for her characters. And I was like, wow. And I associate that with her brand now. Plus, it really goes alongside her books because if you read her books, her language is very artistic from a color palette standpoint. So it's very consistent with her overall branding and her writing style. So, a social media pulse check. So every once in a while, we need to be intentional in evaluating where our audience is and how consistent we're being in relation to the audiences that we're trying to cultivate on respective platforms. So where do digital versions of you exist? There might be digital versions of you don't even know exist. For example, I checked under the hashtag for my name, hashtag Kyra Ann Dawkins, and there were posts that I had never seen before. Apparently, I'm not the only one that hashtags under my own name, which is pretty awesome, but you want to check out those things every once in a while.
So, your book title, too.
Yeah, exactly. So Pinterest, which Emily particularly knows a lot about, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Medium, TikTok, Goodreads, woo, one of my personal favorites.
Which Kyra is the queen of.
So do you have control over your digital image? You want the content associated with you. Of course, you want other people to contribute as well. But if you have ultimate control over how you're perceived, for example, you want your website to be the first thing that pops up when people search your name on Google, for example. Bear that in mind as you cultivate your digital presence and make sure that your control overrides other people's. Would you agree with that, Emily?
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. You ultimately would want to have control over your image. You want other people to contribute to that, but you want the main narrative to be the one that you're speaking.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if you guys have questions about how to navigate cultivating your audiences in particular social media spaces, feel free to drop those questions. I forget this is reversed.
It's weird.
Questions into the chat along the side, or if you're watching this after the live presentation, drop them in the comments below. We do circle back and answer those. So as you're evaluating your social media engagement, your social media marketing strategy, ask yourselves these questions. Where is your biggest audience? So Emily, would you like to talk through how you would go through this exercise yourself right now?
Sure. So when I started my social media presence, I started more as a writer. So I started pretty heavily on Twitter because the writing community on Twitter is awesome. And I did a lot of kind of searching that hashtag, interacting with those types of people, and ultimately ended up moving over to Instagram with a lot of those people because through just continuously posting on a bunch of different platforms, you kind of figure out what platform that your audience responds to more. I mean, you guys saw the slide previously. There's a ton of social media platforms out there, even more than the ones that we had listed. So don't try to like overwhelm yourself with feeling like you have to post consistently on every single one of these platforms. When I was starting out, really Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn were kind of my main four. And then once I started figuring out where my audience actually is, what type of content I like to put out there, what type of content they respond to, really Instagram is the one that I'll post to now pretty regularly. And then Facebook, LinkedIn is a little bit more for like those bigger posts if I have like a book signing, or if like my hardcover is coming out soon. So like I'll make that type of announcement. Yeah, I actually passed hardcover. I'll make that type of like book update announcement on like LinkedIn and Facebook as well. But more consistently, I'm on Instagram just because that's where my audience is. That's where I found them to be.
So, sort of as a follow up, why do this? What's the goal of sort of evaluating your community engagement, particularly as you acknowledged, Emily, on a specific platform? So, is the goal to grow your business, to sell more books, to land speaking engagements? Granted, some of different aspects of these goals could apply to different phases of your author journey. In my case, for example, there was a period of time when I was really, really focused on booking podcast shows, right? This is not to say that I'm no longer interested in that, but I right now is not a concentrated period of me doing so. In the concentrated period of looking to be booked on podcast shows, I've made some of my content and some of the hashtags I was using a little bit more podcast centric, for example. So bearing this in mind, as you've made that evaluation, have you found yourself going through different goal phases in creating your content?
Oh, for sure. I think it depends for me often what like phase of the book writing and publishing process I'm in. When I'm in kind of like the early drafting or even up into revisions, a lot of my posts are about like the story itself and like character palettes and like character artwork and like different elements like that. I'll pull lines that I'm writing or like share a line from like my previous like writing session. But yeah, it you want to craft your message based on kind of what your overall goals are, and that's going to change, and that's natural. You're not going to spend the entirety of your author journey posting solely the one thing about your characters. You're going to want to vary it and kind of tailor it to the journey itself. So once you get closer to like the actual publication of your book, a lot of your posts will probably be a little bit more like marketing tailored or like event tailored. But it also kind of just depends on like what your overarching goals are for yourself or your book or your business too. I had to kind of sit down early on in my journey and figure out like what is my goal? Like why am I writing? What is like my purpose in that? So like I had to kind of piece together that I write to share the stories of women in the past and encourage women today to kind of step into the narrative of their individual story. So no matter what phase of the process I'm in, all of the posts that I'm posting in some way kind of reflect back to that central goal.
Amen to that. So again, as you guys are sort of navigating, not just evaluating what your overall goal is, as Emily so excellently articulated. And Mackenzie and I have talked about this a little bit in the past as well, particularly as we were composing the slide deck, talking about educating, inspiring, and entertaining people with your content. So you want to adhere to the overall goal of, like, as Emily put, you want to be consistent with the base of your branding, but as dropped inside of the chat, we go through different seasons of emphasis in our content. But regardless of the season, we adhere to our main messaging goal, and we make sure that our content does at least one or of these three things: educate, inspire, entertain. Because ultimately, you want to add value to people's days when they interact with your content, and value to your day. You don't just want to generate content for the sake of generating content, because then it comes across as formulaic and like not authentic to you or your brand. Do you have any thoughts on this, Emily?
Yeah, you don't want to just post for content's sake. You don't want to just kind of contribute to the white noise. We're all, for the most part, on social media. What that is, to just like sit there and scroll and not actually like get anything from the content that you're looking at. So you want to put out content that people are going to resonate with, that people are going to connect with, and that people want to like engage back with you on.
Beautifully put. So, types of content. So, different platforms, particularly if we're talking about social media, have different mechanisms for these content types. So, there's usually short form, long form, and visual. As somebody who, alongside Emily, frequents Instagram, there are ways to engage technically with all three, but it's particularly short form and visual, right? Whereas a platform like Medium or even LinkedIn and Facebook could be geared more towards long form and visual. That kind of balance. And really, like, my first thought, like my bit of advice would be to, again, engage in the content that resonates the most with you, but try to diversify the content that you share by having aspects of all three of these. Like, sure, it's okay if most of your content is more visual or most of your content is more short form, but I think that it really diversifies and lends credibility to your overall platform if you have evidence of all three of these somewhere in your branding. Speaking of branding, the brand identity exercise, and Emily actually did an excellent job of kind of alluding to this earlier on when she was talking about adhering to her main goal throughout the seasons of her marketing. So, what are three identities that you embody in your author persona? So, Mackenzie and I both did this, and the answers that Mackenzie shared were that she is a museum nerd, she's a publishing coach, and she writes museum-y books. And when I did it, I said, I'm a speculative fiction writer. I honor human voices to facilitate conversations about human life and heritage, and I love family. Emily, what would you say? Dun, dun, dun.
Ooh, good question. I would say I write stories that creatively share the stories of women in the past. I am also a publishing coach. And then I'm a reader, because I feel like those three things together capture kind of my goals and like my presence on social media. If you go to any of my social media, you'll see probably those three things more prominently than anything else. And the same if you look at Kyra and Mackenzie's.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if you guys have any, as you guys navigate, we're going to be able to share these slides internally for those of you who are inside of the Quipverse, but feel free to pause here and engage with this exercise whenever you can to sort of really distill what are three core identities that you want to hold consistent throughout your branding. Granted, sometimes some aspects of these identities will be more emphasized than others, but again, knowing that about yourself will help you guide consistency and continuity throughout your content going forward. So yeah, it's super helpful. It gives you more of a base to draw from instead of constantly being like, this is my book. this is my book, and this is also my book, and this is this. Yeah. It reminds people that you are a multifaceted human being, but in a structured way. So feel free to, for those of you who are joining live, drop those identities in the chat if you'd like, and we can engage with them as this presentation goes out. But again, I think that this brand identity exercise has been super helpful for me. So, post ideas. So, continue to track your writing publishing journey. Emily did a great job of talking about this a little bit earlier. Events, milestones, behind the scenes. So I think that last point resonates with me the most, because even though the highs are great, people also want to understand the day-to-day, particularly since we're authors, we are craftsmen in a way. It's like there are moments that tend to be glorified, but being honest about the struggles or about the mundaneness of certain aspects of what we do, like lends to our humanity and lends to the nuance of the stories we want to tell. Don't just focus on the highs. To be clear, talk about the highs, but be willing to talk about the lows and the bleh. Like, you know what I mean? Because there can be a beauty and an honesty in that. So
yeah, I would agree. I don't know if it's just because we're so involved in social media now, or the pandemic, or maybe kind of a combo of those things. But like, it seems like now more than ever, people are really interested in like the person behind the book or the product or the business or whatever it is, rather than just that thing itself. So don't be afraid to kind of take that step back and share some of those more personal things, and kind of like peel the curtain back a little bit.
And again, in terms of like diversifying, like letting your audience into your world through the behind the scenes, and I've seen Emily do quite a bit of this, circulating, quote graphics, mood boards, playlists, character reels, elements related to your book. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but you can create or generate partnerships with organizations that you're passionate about, or become an affiliate or a representative for products that coincide really well with your book. Looking at you, Emily. So there are lots of ways you can continue to leverage this. And if you are ever looking for ideas, take inspiration from other authors, other creators, because at the end of the day, like, great artists steal. Of course, you put
like an artist
spin on things. Steal like an artist. Best practices. Don't be afraid to speak about your specific passions. So some people think that when they are really passionate about something, that it's too niche or too weird, that it won't resonate with someone. I can honestly say that maybe occasionally if you talk about something very specific, that it might not resonate with a whole bunch of people, but it'll resonate very, very deeply with the people it's meant to resonate with, especially if it's consistent with your broader branding. So I, for example, am obsessed with Mickey Mouse. And you could probably do, it's funny because Emily actually said this one. You could probably go through like my Instagram like feed and like do like a hunt for a Mickey, because he's like an Easter egg in multiple aspects of my photos and stuff. But me talking about how much I love Mickey, granted, that isn't too niche. A lot of people love Mickey, and good for good reason. But that might seem a little out of place when the broader context of my more dystopian, dark fantasy vibes. But again, it lends to who I am, lends to my humanity. Part of the reason why I love Mickey and Disney so much is because it has cultivated so many positive family memories. And one of my identities is that I love family. So you can make it work. And don't be afraid to talk about those kinds of things. And what if I'm multi-passionate? If there's somebody who I know navigates the multi-passionate space well, it's Emily. So, you want to talk about this?
Sure. So, this was something that I really struggled with when I first kind of sat down and tried to create my social media or like author presence. Obviously, part of being an author is the actual like writing and creation of the story. And so that's obviously a key part of that whole journey. But I knew that I didn't necessarily want my entire platform to just be that. I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm a reader, I'm a writer, I'm a historian. I care about the stories of women in history. I want to encourage women today to own the narrative of their individual story. So there's kind of a lot of facets that go into who I am. Those are the exact things that like make up you and make up your brand and set you apart from other authors, other writers, other people out there creating. So share those things, talk about those things. And any time that you can kind of tie those things back to that central like storytelling element, even better.
Amen to that. And again, we talked about this earlier, make sure all your posts point back to a central message and goal, not just buy my book. People don't like just constantly being sold to all the time. It's a lot. Especially with all the ads that are on social media platforms now. Yeah, don't be like that.
Yeah.
An author's guide to social media by your author coaches. So a lot of our colleagues helped us collaborate in the generation of this slide, but you know, I would still honestly say that Emily is our social media expert. So it's particularly wonderful. It's particularly wonderful to have her here to help us navigate all like our cumulative advice. So Pinterest. Emily, she knows a thing or two about Pinterest. Ooh, can you guys still hear me? Uh-oh. So yeah, Pinterest has the longest content shelf life, where tweets can get lost in just 23 minutes, which is crazy. Pinterest can have a half-life of 3 months. That is so long. So you can turn your quotes into posts. You can make mood boards. You can pin your blog posts. You can collaborate with other people. You can embed your feed on your website. Oh, you can embed your Pinterest feed onto your website, which I did that recently, and it's pretty cool. It really gives people a sense of your general aesthetic and vibe. And you can spotlight other artists by doing relevant pins. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Emily knows a thing or two about your Pinterest. You have any further thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really love about Pinterest is it's one of the few platforms that you can kind of leverage outwardly for your audience, but also like internally for you. So like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, those types of things, really the content you're creating and what you're putting out there is for your audience solely. But on Pinterest, kind of how Kyra ran through some of these, you can like make mood boards for yourself to kind of storyboard and figure out like what your world is going to look like or what some of your characters look like. Those different types of things you can internalize for yourself rather than just place outwardly for your audience.
Excellently said. Moving right along. LinkedIn. So admittedly, I'm trying to hold myself accountable to being a little bit more active on this space. Something that I have adopted doing recently is committing to offering commentary on a relevant article to like my professional life or what I like the themes I engage with in my book, like oral history, once a week, which more or less breaks up my, I guess, consistent LinkedIn engagement. But LinkedIn could be great for networking yourself as an author or as a business or whatever professional capacity you want to lean into. On LinkedIn, I pitch myself a little bit more. Not to say that I don't pitch myself as an author and author coach, but I lean a little bit more into pitching myself as an academic. Oftentimes you could post bigger author life business updates and info on things that would help you build a resume and unlock future career opportunities based off of the expertise displayed inside of your book. So yes, this is a particularly pro tip. I actually forgot about this, my own tip or our own tip a couple days ago when I posted something, and I really noticed the difference. Do not put links to anything in your post, because LinkedIn will reduce your visibility so much. Like, it will squash it. So drop the links in the comment section instead, because the bots that like search through things don't really check the comment section for links.
Yeah, and like Facebook does this too. So both LinkedIn and Facebook drop it in the comments, but then in like the actual body of what you wrote, put something along the lines of like link in comments, just so people are aware.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Facebook. So, admittedly, Facebook is becoming an increasingly hostile environment for authors. Like, not the like hostile is a little bit overstating it a bit, but it's like not. It's harder to become visible there now as it once was, especially when Emily and I first launched our first books, like back in July of 2020. But so you can set up an author page in addition to whatever personal profile you have, and share things like blog posts, life updates, content that you share other places. Facebook, because Meta basically owns everything. Facebook has a lot of cross compatibility with Instagram, WhatsApp, etc. And Facebook actually gives you the option to like link to a website. Again, heads up, Facebook will not offer you great visibility and even inhibit it unless you pay to boost your posts. It's really ramping up on the inhibiting and boosting and all that jazz. Especially because of like the demographic shifts of like who uses Facebook now. Let's just say it's moving more to it's pressing more towards the people who are willing and able to spend money, which is why ads are becoming so popular. Take that for what you will. But Facebook could also be good for making a group for things like beta readers, for fiction like VIPs, and for nonfiction. It could be great for making a group for wanting to learn more about what you talk about in your book. You could also join groups. One of our colleagues, Stephen Howard, talks a lot about how he's able to peruse like pertinent writing groups to just sort of gain community with fellow authors in his shared genre space on Facebook. Because some of those communities have been around for so long that even when Facebook increasingly tries to come for our necks with ad prices, those communities continue to thrive. Instagram. I'm going to let Emily take this slide over.
Can do. So, as you've kind of seen, if you're on Instagram, the algorithm shifts constantly. Constantly. But B, right now, because of the rise of TikTok and kind of the quick input of information, and like our shorter attention spans, reels are huge, very popular. So to kind of keep up with that trend, Instagram algorithm is favoring reels above just the normal static graphics or images that kind of Instagram started off as. So whenever you're kind of creating any type of content on Instagram, just keep that in mind. And I'll kind of say that just like across the board, no matter what like social media platform that you are creating content on, just the algorithms do shift a lot, but do your best to just kind of try to keep some semblance of a track of like what is going on if you can, to make sure that like whatever you do create will get the best visibility possible. So Instagram really in and of itself is largely visually driven through those reels, through like longer form videos you can upload to like Instagram TV, and then still some of those like still graphics and like photograph type content. Aesthetics, because it's so visually driven, aesthetics is really important on Instagram, both like in your feed itself, but also like in the individual posts or reels that you put up. As an author, Bookstagram is something you should definitely be aware of. It does kind of lend itself a little bit more towards fiction, I'll say like fiction, poetry, memoir to a certain extent, depending on like the type of memoir and like the content itself. There are some spheres within Bookstagram that like nonfiction does thrive to, but again, that kind of depends on the topic that you're talking about. Usually, like creative things, if you're writing about like music or writing about writing or the arts or museums, like in Mackenzie's case, like those types of things, nonfiction wise, tend to go over decently well. But within Bookstagram, there's a ton of awesome things that you can do as an author. Things like book tours. That's a really great platform to start connecting with and reaching out to book reviewers to get reviews for your books. There's a lot of like booked theme activities that go on all the time. People will throw things like read-alongs. There's people out there that you can collaborate for different things, which I believe we have another slide coming up that will talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, if you are a fiction author, Instagram is one of the places you really should be hanging out. Along with kind of the algorithm on Instagram for like hashtags changes a lot as well. So it used to be you wanted to throw as many hashtags as you can on that post. The limit is 30, so you wanted to get as close to relevant hashtags of 30 that you could. But now the algorithm is favoring posts that have anywhere between like 3 to 5 hashtags. And most of those hashtags should be pretty niche to whatever your post is about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, didn't the Fractured Past Instagram tour, is it still going? Is it still
over.
Just end?
It was last week. So it was Sunday through Saturday last week.
See? So again, she knows a thing or two about this. You want to talk us through Instagram tours?
I will. Instagram book tours are really, really fun. Until I was an author, did not even knew it was a thing, did not know they existed. So I'll kind of like talk you through what that looks like if you were in the same boat that I am now. So usually they'll run for about a week. Again, that can kind of like be shorter or longer, kind of just depending on like the tour group that you go with or however many people you decide to involve personally into the tour. But essentially what happens is you will end up sending out usually physical copies. Sometimes people will accept ebook copies or even audiobook copies. But usually you'll send out those physical copies to other authors, influencers, readers, bookstagrammers, those types of people. And then in turn, what they will end up doing is they'll take a picture of your book, usually some sort of like aesthetic picture. If you find my tour on Instagram, one of my stops like dresses in like full blown like ball gowns, which is like super, super relevant to like my brand and like my books, because we time travel to all these fun places with those types of clothing. But they'll take some sort of aesthetic picture that like reflects what your book is about. Usually within like the copy of that post, they'll put the synopsis of your book and they'll ask some sort of question that pertains to what your book is about. So again, I deal with history, I deal with time travel, all those fun things. So usually the questions are something like, if you could time travel to any period of time, what would you want it to be? If you could have talked to anyone in history, who would you want that to be? They will usually, for that week of the tour, also keep the Amazon link or whatever link you would prefer, whether it's like Barnes & Noble or to your own website, in their Instagram bio. Usually there's also a giveaway involved, and it'll be like a collective giveaway. So the entrants on every single post all count together, and then there's only like one winner. Some too, depending on like how you set up the tour, will also read and review your book. If you are going through a tour group, usually that is like a higher price point. And so if that's something that you want, you'll usually have to pay that higher price point.
Right. That makes sense. More on IG Book Series.
So yeah, so there's a few ways if you want to run a virtual book tour through Instagram, there's a few ways you can go about it. You can decide, I want to skip the middleman, I want to do this all myself, I want to be in control of like who actually is a part of this tour, and I want to do the outreach. So what you can do is you can do that outreach yourself to different people that you find on Instagram or that you're connected with, and ask them if they would be willing to be a part of the tour. Then you would just kind of have to figure out with them which date they want to take, and make sure that like if you're running it for a week that you have one person to fill each of those days. Or if you're kind of doing that outreach yourself, you can also create a Google form, which is really helpful. Create that Google form that people can then fill out to apply to be on your book tour team. But you'll also want to make sure that you're doing a couple posts about the fact that you are looking for people for a book tour, so people actually know that this Google form is available, and then tell them where they can find it. So maybe it's in your Instagram bio, or you link it in the comments of that LinkedIn post, or whatever that looks like. Just make sure it's really easily accessible to people. Otherwise, you're not going to have people signing up because they give up because they can't find it.
Right.
The other option, if you're like, I'm crazy busy, I don't have time to kind of like organize all of this myself, I don't know what it really looks like, and I want to make sure it's done right the first time around, you can run it through a book tour company, which is a thing that exists that I also did not know about until I became an author. So I have personally done 2 book tours, one for each of the books in my series so far, and I've run them both through Storygram tours. So I can like attest to them specifically. MTMC is another tour group that I see a lot of posts about, kind of on the Bookstagram sphere. But if you just do a little searching, there are a ton of them. So you will not run out of tour groups to kind of reach out to. But most of them will operate in a very similar way. They have a sign-up form usually found on their website or linked in their bio that they will direct people to, and they will sign up automatically right on that. The tour group itself will kind of sort through all of those people, send you a list of those people and their addresses. Then you send out the books. And then really the only other thing that you have to do is kind of participate on those posts as they go out. So like them, share them, drop stuff in the comments, see if anyone like tagged you in the comments, and make sure you respond to those as an author. Don't just ignore them. And then yes, and then like share them to your stories and different things like that.
Excellently put. Now to move on to a platform that is quite polarizing, Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter could either be a fruitful place of discourse or screaming into the void or a dumpster fire. It depends on the day. It depends on the topic. But in terms of making the most of Twitter, because Emily and I would say that we're both on Twitter like often enough, but it isn't our main platform, right? So definitely recommend following the hashtag writing community and using this hashtag on posts, because it's actually very active as a hashtag for Twitter engagement. Follow the hashtag writers list and join relevant threads. Whenever I hosted a Goodreads giveaway, or whenever there was like a promotion around my book price, I always would hop on to writers lists and just drop the link. Probably depending on when it was, like I would probably do it for like 5 minutes every day for a week, just to see like how many, like, because writers lists could reach out very, very far algorithmically, and you notice a spike in engagement, especially on Goodreads giveaways when you do that. So again, I would highly recommend the writers list feature. feel free to play with the polls feature. That's fun. Like, I mean, it's something that I feel like doesn't get a lot of play, but when it does, I think it's interesting. Follow and engage with your favorite authors. Bookmark and tweets you find inspiring, because the more you bookmark tweets, the more Twitter will recommend your platform or your account to other people on Twitter. And something else that's really interesting about Twitter is that Twitter is kind of the home for journalism. So if there are journalists that you admire or you're looking to align with local press, oftentimes it's actually easier to get in contact with a local journalist by DMing them through Twitter than it might be contacting the newspaper directly or contacting their individual newspaper email. So that's just sort of like an aside.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. The only reason why I know this is because I don't want to say in like a past life or whatever, but there was a time when I thought I was going to be like a journalist, so I can attest to this being like an industry trade secret. Lists, posts, and profiles that interest you, especially for your fellow indie authors. So there is a list feature inside of Twitter. I'm honestly not the most familiar with how it works, but I've seen them. Do you have more experience with those, Emily?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not entirely sure how they operate, but I have seen them around.
Mm-hmm. And then these last couple of ones, like, feel free to post random thoughts. Questions perform particularly well in terms of like fostering engagement, because Twitter is a discourse sparker, so people just like to say stuff. My last tweet, I don't know if it's my last tweet, but a tweet that I like viscerally remember making is that sleet is the post-nasal drip of weather. Just because it is. Like, prove me wrong. Like, it is. So I remember tweeting that recently. I don't know.
But that's perfect, though, because clever things like that go over really, really well on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got more engagement than I thought. So there you go. Just don't be afraid to throw things out into the void. Integrate your Twitter feed inside of your website. So I'm pretty sure that on my website page, I have my Instagram feed and my Twitter feed. So, granted, my Instagram feed is a little bit more lively, but it could be something really cool to incorporate inside of your website homepage. So Mackenzie shared that she has it. And if there's time at the end, I can click over and show you guys what her Twitter feed looks like pertaining to her next book, The Artifact Hunter. Oh! So Terry's actually lending some of her expertise about what the list function does. So thank you so much, Terry. So lists are useful if you want to follow certain groups of people or content topics.
Oh.
It means you don't have to look at all of the affluence. You can focus on only those people or topics that matter to you. So you can just click inside of the list and peruse their content. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's good to know, because exactly like you said earlier, Twitter can be a dumpster fire, and you might be looking for something, but you don't even know where to start because it's just like inundated with tweets.
Absolutely. Medium. So we were talking about the different types of like short form content, long form content, visual content. Well, this is medium content. Ha ha ha.
Conveniently named.
Conveniently named. Granted, most of the medium content tends to be longer form, or on the medium side of long, I guess. So you can import stories from your blog to Medium, and then Emily does a great job of doing this. You can pin those blogs to a blog board on Pinterest. The Medium Partner Program is a great way to monetize your posts. Granted, I mean, it really depends on how willing you are to be active in order for that to become like lucrative. But the more affiliate links you set up, as long as you understand like all the tax implications of managing them, it could be worthwhile. Medium is an incredible space for great exposure. Posting things on your own website does have the benefit of you can post and write about whatever you want because it's your space. With that being said, when you post something onto Medium's already such an elevated platform that it's easier for SEO reasons for your work to be discoverable in association with other things discussing similar subject matter. So So that is kind of a reason why Medium can be particularly beneficial. Yeah, so they do have some strict censorship parameters. I can tell you guys stories about people who have had their content censored on Medium for one reason or another. So that's another reason why your website could be helpful. But again, Medium is a great place to find engagement with new audiences. Yeah, it could be a solid platform for launching your article series. So some of you had an article series that went in tandem with your book launching. Since there are a variety of different types of article series, maybe you want to do another kind. Say you did a more reflection-oriented article series around launch, and now you want to do something that's a little bit more research-oriented to like re-engage with your book subject matter again. So Medium can be a great home for that. Be sure to tag your posts as you launch them. So tags are akin to hashtags in like Instagram and Twitter. Tags are a way to make sure that your content is properly associated with other Medium articles talking about similar subject matter. And you could become a contributing writer for pertinent Medium publications. So recently, and I want to brag about this a little bit, recently, someone with one of our colleagues within the Manuscripts ecosystem, they were able to have, I can say Vincent's name. I'm going to say Vincent's name. Vincent wrote an article about like editing or navigating the historical fiction novel, if I'm correct. And that got posted into the Writing Cooperative, which is a huge publication within Medium. And so, yeah, you can become a contributing writer for that. And Manuscripts as an entity is a contributing writer to the Writing Cooperative, for example. Do you have any further thoughts on Medium, Emily?
I think you covered it really well.
Thank you. So again, revisiting article series. So we have the teaser type, which is usually 8 to 12 shorter posts of relevant book excerpts. This usually works particularly well for nonfiction authors because you're not as worried about spoiling aspects of your plot, right? The reflective series type, 6 to 9 Medium posts. These work particularly well on Medium. Of thematic considerations of content and or process. So this doesn't require you to do any additional research. It's just you reflecting, pontificating on what your book process has been, what you might have decided to remove, what was very important for you to add, etc. And then deep dive, 4 to 6 longer posts that are usually over 1,200 words that typically involve further research. YouTube. Okay, so our colleague Stephen Howard knows a thing or two about this.
He does.
He lent a lot of his expertise in building this slide, but because of things like this, Emily and I are learning a little bit more about YouTube too. But YouTube caters to fiction authors looking to share their process and thoughts on writing. So to be fair, YouTube is another more fiction-leaning space, particularly in delving into how the writing process works, because people love to, like share the highs and lows and like pontificate on that. Everything here lives forever if you do it right. So yeah, YouTube is another great place for the longevity of your content in the same way that Pinterest is, and the opposite of what Twitter is. But in order to be successful on YouTube, you need for there to be like a high caliber of quality. So you need good video and audio. You'll need to learn video editing skills or know somebody else who has good video editing skills. It is the second largest search engine other than Google. That's kind of a big deal and good for SEO reasons. So titles should be picked carefully to complement search terms, search engine optimization. Live streams are big with the writing community. Ta-da! This is a live stream. You're part of the writing community. Look at the alignment. Okay. So recorded video should be around 10 minutes long. People like things to be short, sweet, and punchy. Short, sweet, and punchy. Unless it's like a recording of like some lecture from class or you're trying to fall asleep to the video, something like that. But 10 minutes is usually people's attention spans, if we're being honest. Research what others are doing hint, it's already been done. Just put your own spin on it. Again, steal like an artist, as Emily said earlier. And be consistent with when you post and watch for trends. Consistency is an important aspect of cultivating an audience, just in general across all platforms, but this seems to be especially true for YouTube. TikTok. Okay. So Mackenzie Finkley is our resident TikTok queen. There's actually another video on this incredible YouTube channel where we interview Aparna Verma, who is Book Talk, which is like the book specific niche of TikTok. She is very much Book Talk viral. Mackenzie is Book Talk viral in her own right, but also a little bit more for just like her general MacFink brand. So TikTok has Instagram. I'm like pretty sure that it was either Emily or Mackenzie who put this wording, but TikTok is Instagram by the throat when it comes to short form video content.
I think that was Mackenzie.
Visibility on TikTok is far easier to obtain than on Instagram. So this might become less true as, you know, Reels become more popular. But and Instagram trying to keep up with the TikTok algorithm in that regard. Also to be, again, kind of alluding to the demographic shifts when we were talking about Facebook earlier. Instagram is like this. Okay, I'm gonna say it. This is just the nerd in me, but TikTok is catered more directly to Generation Z, whereas Instagram is more directed towards Zillennials, which is what I am, and millennials. So there's like definitely a generation overlap. And granted, anybody can have a platform anywhere. It's funny because as a sort of a niche example, Dan Povenmire, who is the founder or one of the creators of one of my favorite TV shows, Phineas and Ferb, made a whole song about how he's too old for TikTok. And there's kind of like a whole thriving community of non-Gen Zers thriving on TikTok. So if you're not a member of Gen Z, you can still belong on TikTok. Just know that that's a huge characteristic of the audience that lives there, right? Keep in mind, if you recycle content, use SnapTik to remove TikTok watermarks. So if you make a TikTok and you want to bring it over to Instagram Reels, Instagram and TikTok both, like, you know, the algorithms both press down when you make content on the competing platform. So bear that in mind. Because as somebody who probably spends much more time on Instagram, I will take some of the content I make for Instagram and put it over on TikTok, or vice versa. So also Instagram Reels trends are about 3 to 6 weeks behind TikTok. It's getting a little, this is closing in a little bit. It's more like maybe 1 to 3 weeks now, or it's trying to get there. Unless there's something like very major that happens in popular culture, like the Oscars. Dun, dun, dun. So save that video to repost later if you make something on TikTok and the sound becomes relevant on Instagram a little bit later on. Use trending sounds and formats to your advantage. Don't reinvent the wheel. Trending sounds are trending for a reason. And like for some reason, again, and I don't know if it's like a pattern recognition thing that's happening with our generation, but there's a major trend of people watching like iterations and the different versions of the same thing in a row. And that is what TikTok is optimizing. So a lot of people like to watch different takes on the same sound and can get lost in that thread for hours. And so that is why you want to take advantage of like this pattern seeking. So don't reinvent the wheel in that regard. Post regularly. Feel free to post more than once a day. Unlike Instagram, TikTok actually encourages you to post as often as possible whenever you feel like. Whereas Instagram is like, hi, post once a day, please. Like, don't try to post twice in the same day or we'll be mad. Or we'll try to shut you out of your account.
Been there. Instagram jail is a thing.
Pleasant. So TikToks have a long shelf life as well. I'm pretty sure that a real shelf life is like 3 weeks, and a TikTok shelf life is like a month plus, like right around a month. So people will come to your profile to binge videos. One post might go viral after 4 weeks on the shelf. Granted, similarly to Instagram, TikTok has like a feed on like your homepage. So in theory, somebody could scroll all the way back and like something from like a year or two ago. But in terms of like being circulated actively on the For You page or the live algorithm feed, that could be fed algorithmically for up to a month. And I've noticed like later spikes in some of my TikTok content. I just hopped on the TikTok train recently, and I'm not going to go so far as to say that I regret it, because I don't, but I still think that my home will be Instagram. Goodreads! I'm so excited for this. I love Goodreads. Why? Because it is a book-centric like social media platform. But in addition to being book-centric, unlike the other book related platforms like Storygraph, Library Thing, I'm forgetting, Likewise. Don't get me wrong, those are all great, but those are very reader centric. It's all about cultivating an experience for the reader, whereas Goodreads offers an opportunity of engagement for the readers and for the authors. And 95% of the time, the authors are also readers, like Emily embodies inside of her brand. So what can you do on Goodreads? You can share the books you read. Please do that. Use the updates feature for general bookish thoughts. The updates, I think it's really funny about Goodreads is that the updates thing, or like the button to give general updates, is super small and on the side. I mean, there's times
it took me a while to find.
Yeah.
The first time I wanted to do it.
I'll show you guys where it is. So leave reviews. Please leave reviews, especially if you're reading a book you particularly enjoy it, or you are reading other books that are inside of your genre. Your audience will follow your example and read your book when they see that you're reviewing other books inside your genre, and it connects you more algorithmically to the books that you review, and it shows your credibility in the genre space. So it's a win-win-win situation.
Then take a picture of that book and share that review on Instagram.
Big brain stuff. I think I remember. Did you just do that with Serpent and Dove?
Yeah.
See? How do I know that? Because I stalk Emily on both of those platforms. Anyway, interact with readers who have shelved your book. So like their shelved action. So different authors take different approaches to actually engaging with live reviews from readers, but definitely like it when somebody shelves your book, because there isn't much polarization on that. Answer the ask the author questions. So once you establish your author account, which doesn't take long, especially if you have an Amazon account, readers can, once you enable it, again, it's like literally one of those click buttons that like slide. So you just enable it. Readers can go in and ask you questions, answer those, because it's just some of the questions that come through are a lot of fun. It can just be a casual way to engage with readers and remind them that you are in fact a human being beyond the content you produce. So join giveaways, especially those in your genre. This is what I love about Goodreads. Not only can you host giveaways, but you can join them. And in joining the giveaways, you become algorithmically linked to those books that you enter the giveaways for. They get integrated inside of your to be read shelf, and they're free to join. They're free to join other giveaways. It costs some money to host your own, but I would make the argument that the juice is worth the squeeze in terms of an audience expansion tactic. Before I continue on, do you have any further thoughts on this so far, Emily?
I think you covered it really well. The other thing that like comes to mind, and like, forgive me if I'm wrong in this and like correct me, but Amazon and Goodreads are connected.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So and I've seen a lot when I'm on there, authors will read their own books on the Kindle and highlight and comment, and that those actually show up on Goodreads. So if you are an author that good, I'm glad this is a real thing and I'm not making this up. So if you are an author, you can read your own book on your Kindle, leave comments and expound on things for your audience, highlight different things that you really enjoyed, and use that as kind of another way to further engage your audience.
Excellently said. So you're already an author on Goodreads, so make the most of that, but also follow authors that you admire. List a couple of them as influences on your account, because what does that do? Algorithmically links you to them. The more algorithm links, the better. Follow genres that interest you. Again, stay up to date on relevant genre news and like genre news because algorithmic links. Okay, use your RSS or blog feed to connect that to your Goodreads profile. If you already have a blog up and running, this doesn't take long. There's just something on your homepage where it says upload RSS feed. So every time I post a link on my blog or post an article on my blog, it automatically goes live on my Goodreads feed as well. And shelve your books. Every time you add a book to your TBR pile, it's just fun. It's like your own digital library of yes. And the thing that's funny is that because it's digital, you can have it on multiple shelves at once. So it's just when you show like your intentionality and placing books that you are reading in different places, people will be inclined to do the same with your book. So what's super funny in terms of like the shelving process, as a very, very quick story, my book has been shelved on horror shelves, which in hindsight makes sense, but I never saw The We and the They as like a horror book. But now that so many people who don't know me, or even those who do, have put The We and the They on the horror shelf, I'm coming to understand how it can be seen that way better and learn a little bit more about the horror genre. So shelve your books so that people can have a sense of what you enjoy seeing as an author, but also see in doing that, be cognizant of how other people are shelving the actual book that you wrote. Book reviewers. So thank you guys so much for your patience as we go through all of this, because really, like, social media is a lot. We know we're throwing a whole bunch of information at you, but it's all fun.
Go back and watch this again if you need to.
Absolutely. But book reviewers. So you could use a book platform like NetGalley, Book Sirens, etc. Between NetGalley and Book Sirens, NetGalley and Book Sirens, they're both free to use if you're the one doing the book reviewing, which could still be good for you, because if you're reading books from genres that you enjoy or genres that are like the book that you wrote, then that just lends, again, credibility to your brand. But when it comes to you actually acquiring books, like book reviews, Book Sirens is a bit more accessible because they have a free database that you can look through, whereas NetGalley is expensive, very expensive. But, depending on your author branding and author budget, the juice could be worth the squeeze. Direct outreach via DM. This usually works best on Instagram. We recommend that you offer the ebook first. And before I continue on, Emily, do you have any thoughts on how to best do this, particularly the Instagram space?
Yeah, so Instagram is actually the platform that I do most of my outreach for reviews on. I always recommend that you are following the person that you're going to reach out to for a review. And don't just like follow them and immediately send that DM. Interact with them for a little while, like their posts over like a week or so, leave like some comments on there, and then do that like DM. So it's not just a cold DM. Try to also like personalize it a little bit. Maybe you had like commented on a book review that they had just posted, and it was a book that you really loved, and you threw a comment on there kind of saying that and elaborating on some of the different things that you enjoyed about that book. You could say something about that in that outreach. So again, it's not It's not cold. It's a little bit more personal. It shows that like you have something in common. And that's really great and adds kind of like a bonus to it if that book or that genre relates to your own or has some sort of element that ties over to yours, because then you can be like, I really enjoyed this book as well. My book deals with a similar theme or is a similar genre. I think you might enjoy it too. Would you be interested in a free ebook copy to read and review it for an honest review? So you want to have kind of like that stage of like follow, interact for a little bit, and then do that outreach with something personal.
Absolutely. And in all of this, make sure to thank however you acquire the book review from whomever, make sure you thank them or refer people to their site, their profile, to not just read that review, but you can refer other authors to using them as book reviewers, because they really appreciate, you know, more business or more engagement on their platforms as well. Emily, you know this is your slide.
I love collaborations, guys, and you should love collaborations too, because nothing is better than when you succeed alongside someone else. Success in and of itself is great, but anytime you can succeed with someone else, it's 10 times greater. So this can look like several different things, and we'll kind of like lay this out for you. But one of the ways that you can collaborate with different people or brands is you can be a brand representative. So this will look a little bit different depending on what that brand is and what exactly they're asking you for. But typically, they will want you to talk about and post about their brand, and kind of just share about what you love about it. You will also usually get some sort of free product, whether that's like monthly or like bi-monthly. Again, that'll vary. You also get a discount code that you can personally use. So you'll get like 20% off or 10% off or whatever that looks like. Whenever you personally use that to buy whatever it is that you're being a brand rep for. Usually you'll be asked to feature specific items of that business in so many posts. So maybe they'll ask you like once a week, we want to make sure that we see a post involving X product, or like 5 times a month, please post with each of these different products. They'll tell you specifically what they're looking for. They'll also, if they on their personal, whatever that brand is, on their personal Instagram or whatever platform you're running this through, they'll post updates every so often. And you'll want to make sure that you're engaging on those and then sharing them as well, usually to your story, and then tagging them. You will also get a rep code usually that other people can use. So for example, I am a brand rep for the Soap Nook, which is a small female-owned business by a fabulous friend of mine. If you like all natural soap and body products and stuff like that, you should definitely check them out. But I was given the code MVAN20. So I display that code in my Instagram bio. So then anyone who goes to buy something from the Soap Nook can use that code and get 20% off their order. The other thing that you can do is get an affiliate link. And so this is very similar to a brand representative. The only like real difference is when you get an affiliate link, you get a percentage of the profits from every time people use that link. So if I give Kyra, if I have an affiliate link and I give it to Kyra and she buys whatever, she buys a book or soap or a candle, I'll get a percentage of that purchase because she used my individual link.
More collaborations. Bam.
Yes. So all of that aside, you can also collaborate with authors and other accounts. It doesn't just have to be a quote unquote business. So many fun possibilities, like the slide says. With authors, you can do different things like Instagram lives. You can do video series. I did one of those with a couple of my author friends that we did on YouTube. Those were super fun. You can do a blog tour. Yeah, you can do a book tour like we talked about earlier. You can collaborate on blog features. You can also work with other small businesses, nonprofits. Artists too are really great to work with. You can do things with them like giveaways. So Mackenzie is a really great example of this. There's a company called Museum Nerd, and she did a giveaway where it was her book and then like a t-shirt, a lanyard, and like a mask and some stickers that all had like the Museum Nerd logo on it. So you could do things like that. You can do bookish merch, which I love. I've collaborated with some people for like candles. I've done art prints with some artists. I make stickers myself. Different things like that. I've had soap made. The possibilities are really endless. You can do different things like author features. So you can connect with people from different blogs or magazines. There are a lot of e-magazines today too, which are really great, and they're usually a lot easier to get into because a lot of them are like small business oriented and like individually run. And e-magazines in like the bookstagram world are huge. So those collaborations are really fun, and you get to talk about obviously your book, but more like writing and reading kind of like related content. And then you can do those with newspapers and swap email updates with people as well. Book subscription boxes are also really, really fun. Most, I would say most are a little bit more tailored to, again, like fiction authors, poetry, memoir to a certain extent. But there are boxes that are specifically for nonfiction books as well. And then indie authors too, regardless of your genre. There are a lot of boxes out there for indie authors. So all you really can do is like do your research. And when you do that outreach, make sure that you're reaching out to a book subscription box that fits your genre and the content of your book. So I write young adult historical fiction. If I take the time out of my day to apply to a romance book box, I'm just wasting my time and I'm wasting their time because while that's an element of my story, it's not a huge heavy thing that I focus on. So they're probably going to turn me away. So make sure that your book in the box has alignment. Outreach. I'm a little anal, so I keep a like spreadsheet of all the book boxes I've reached out to, their contact information, if they've like gotten back to me. But honestly, it's one of those things that like if you don't stay organized, then you don't know like who you need to follow up with, who you need to like nudge again, where you are in the process with these different things, because there's a lot of moving pieces. So try to stay organized on that and just continue to outreach. Most of the time they just get like inundated with authors. So try to find those things that like set you and your book apart and specifically connect you and your book with the audience of that specific book box. I always start, just because Bookstagram is a big thing for me, like we talked about, I always start by checking their Instagram bio. You can also check the website, the Facebook page. Usually one of those things will have an author form. Usually it's a Google form that you can just go ahead and fill out. And then if they're interested, usually they'll circle back and ask for like a copy to read. Some will want a physical copy. Most are good with ebooks, but they just want to read it and vet it before they end up deciding whether or not they're going to proceed with you in the book box.
Beautifully explained. So now we've come almost to the end of the road, and we're going to talk about our parting words of wisdom. So, when in doubt, plan out your content. So yes. You can do that through your journal, planner, virtual calendar, whiteboard, etc. Most of our colleagues usually do this for their planning weekly or monthly. I'm more in the weekly vein. I know Emily's more in the monthly vein.
I'm monthly.
So, but going forward to being proactive and what planning your content will really save a lot of headache and heartache, because then you can hold yourself accountable for being consistent. And if you put that schedule in the context of your broader schedule too, you can have a better sense of like when you will have the time or pockets to create these things. Like it just, and trying to have to come up with the idea on the spot, craft it, post it in like little pockets of the day will lend to your content creation, even if the content itself is strong, to being very sporadic. And then that it's just not a good feeling. You know what I mean? I mean, granted, spontaneity is also encouraged, but spontaneity is even more exciting when it happens within the broader context of structure. With this in mind, like as you plan out your content, batching it in advance, so creating a lot of content ahead of time in bulk is good. So it's one thing to actually plan out what you're going to create, and it's another thing to actually create what you can of it in advance. So visual versus copy. Sorry, I lost my voice for a second. So inside of the Manuscripts ecosystem, we kind of talk a little bit about the distinction between the two. Basically, overly Emily's a queen of both of these, but some people tend to lean a little bit more into perfecting the aesthetics and visual. Sometimes people lean a little bit more into longer copy, especially when dealing with an interface like Instagram, where like both the aesthetics and the copy matter for visibility. But make sure that you understand and navigate both of them, and make sure they're consistent with your brand. Keep a record of your batch content together in a content library. So Canva is incredible for this. Yes. Canva is an amazing tool. A million out of 10. This is not sponsored by them, but one day, Canva's awesome. We will sing its praises forever. It's a great place to keep all of your content batched together and schedule your content. So batching your content and scheduling your content are kind of like nestling dolls underneath planning your content. So only works if you really scheduling your content really only works if you batch ahead of time, and you could use different platforms like Hootsuite, Planoly, Later, etc. There are like free versions of this, there are paid versions of this, and it really takes the pressure off of you to have to go physically post things. So yeah, Emily, do you have any further thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, ultimately, like if you're stressed about social media, if just like the mere thought of having to come up with these different things and manage these different platforms, like just grinds your gears or like scares you to death, like that's okay. That's where I was at the beginning. The very best place to start is these three things. Plan out your content ahead of time, batch your content, visual and copy, and then schedule it. These things do take like a little bit of time up front, but in the long run, if you do these in like 3-hour chunks on a Saturday, or like 1 hour a day, every day of the week, they'll end up saving you time in the long run and take the stress away. And make sure that there's some sort of like continuity with your brand and what you're posting.
And finally, post consistently. Keep in a rhythm so your audience knows what to expect. Again, life ebbs and flows, so don't beat yourself up too much if you fall off cadence. But having a cadence is just a good pattern setting, like pattern and anchor for you and for your audience. So yeah, keep your content consistent. Again, spontaneity is a beautiful thing, but spontaneity is even more beautiful within the broader context of structure. Recycle your content. So once you post something, that doesn't mean that it's a one and done deal. Like you can revive things that you posted a long time ago, but it can like have a new surge of energy surrounding it. You can take something that was an infographic and change it into a blog post or change it into a reel or change it into a video. There are lots of ways that you can use your content that shares similar messaging and repurpose it in a variety of different ways so that, again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. And lastly, we talked about this a lot earlier, but vary your content. Photos, reels, graphics, stories, lives, long form, video, etc. There are so many ways that you can engage. Of course, like, don't do or engage with content that you don't like, but it's better to lean into what you enjoy while also dabbling in other things than only focusing on one thing unless you only want to be known for that one thing. If you want to be known for the message, it's good to diversify. But if you want to be known for the message and the medium, then it's okay if you hyper specialize. But most of the time, within the context of authorship, it's more about the message. And so diversifying the medium helps further the message. Do you have any further thoughts on that, Emily?
Yeah, I guess I would just add that, like, social media in general, especially when you're kind of starting out and trying to figure out, like, okay, what is my brand? What am I trying to say? What does this look like? Where's my audience? All those kind of, like, important questions that you ask yourself at the beginning. It's all about kind of like experimenting and trying something once, seeing what works. You might discover that reels are just not your thing, and that's okay. If you prefer to like sit down and write a long form blog post that on your blog, and then like throw up a picture on Instagram telling people that you just put a blog post up, like, that's totally fine. It'll take a little bit of like experimentation and trying some different things to figure out what you like to create and what your audience responds to, and kind of the marriage of that happy medium is what you want to go for, because obviously you want to connect with your audience, but like you want to have fun with your social media platform too. You don't want it to feel like a chore, because if you're not having fun, your audience is going to pick up on that, and they want to have fun and engage with you. And you want to create content that is fun for you, but also informative and connecting for them.
Mm-hmm. I concur with all aforementioned statements. So that draws our formal presentation to a close. In terms of Q&A, since we did run a little bit over time here, thank you so much for joining us for all of that fantastic information.
It was a lot of information.
Yeah, it was a lot. So we definitely recommend viewing this a couple of times at your leisure. But we do have time for one question. And I see two questions about Goodreads. And I'm trying to figure out which would be, well, they're both pretty brief in terms of how you answer them. So how do you find out if someone shelves your book? The fastest way to find out is if you go to your book's page. You as an author can see so there are two places. On the book's page, if you scroll down, you'll see who's left reviews. And at the bottom of where the reviews are left, it'll leave a list of this person has added it to shelf. This person has added it to be read. And then alongside that update, you just click like. The fastest place to find that is on the book's page, Goodreads page itself. So that's one thing. There's also a place called, on the book page, there's kind of like a small green button that says book stats, where you can click to see how many people have added your book to the TBR, and you could also see where people have shelved it inside of that stats reel as well. So that's sort of two things. And this other quick question, but also when somebody joins the giveaway, when they enter a giveaway, then they appear on the page, like in that more general list. So
yeah, whenever someone enters a giveaway for your book or whatever book, it automatically puts that book on their shelf.
Exactly. Unless they have their settings where it doesn't do that, but that's very, very hard to not set up, to disable. So like 95% of the time, that's what happens. So can you explain more about the Kindle thing and making comments for readers? How does that work? So Emily did an excellent job of sort of explaining the connection earlier, but granted, it is nuanced. So surprise, surprise, Amazon owns everything. including our souls. Just kidding. Basically, Amazon owns Goodreads. So if you set up your Goodreads account with your Amazon account, and you also have a Kindle account, which is effectively your Amazon account, whenever you leave highlights inside of a Kindle book, you can choose to publish those highlights to your Goodreads account, right? Comments too. So you can publish those highlights and like the comments that you make with the highlights, or both, like they're separate things. So then they will, what we often recommend, particularly since it is within the context of your account, you are flagged as the author. Flagged sounds weird. You are acknowledged as the author. And I actually did this with my book. Did you do this with yours, Emily?
I have not yet. I have a weird disconnect between my like Kindle and Goodreads that I have to figure out, but it's on my list of things to do.
Yes, I am. But yeah, I was able to do this with my book. And something else that happens is if one of your readers has a Kindle and a Goodreads account, when you finish the book on the Kindle, whatever review you leave on your Kindle automatically goes to Goodreads and Amazon, but it shows up on Goodreads faster. So this is like, at the end of the day, it's just safer to post a review separately on Goodreads and Amazon, just because even though that seems like a shortcut for Kindle, like it works most of the time, but not consistently. But all of that is to say that it works because of Amazon owning everything. That's how it works. So yeah, I don't see any other burning questions. It would appear that we've left the rest of our audience stunned and silent in the amazement of our presentation, Emily. So thank you so much for joining us in this sphere in the author marketing strategy series. I continue to learn a lot from Emily, particularly from a social media standpoint. And I hope we hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evenings, days, whatever time it is in the world where you are.
Good night, guys.
Bye, beautiful people.